Today's gospel reading is one of the troubling ones, and when I talked about it last year, I focused on some aspects of it. This year, I want to focus on others. And it's the gospel reading where Jesus is approached by a woman from Canaan, a Canaanite woman, which means one of the pagan people who lived in the Holy Land. And she asks for him to help her, and he says no, because he's come to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And this is, of course, an important part of Jesus' ministry. He first comes to Israel. He's the Messiah of Israel. And of course, then, as this woman shows, he also, though, goes to the whole world. We'll get to that in a second. But it's troubling, because he says to her, we don't give the food of the children to the dogs, right? And as a non-Jew, this is how she's understood. But this is not just Jews who think this way. Our wonderful ancestors, the Greeks, thought the same way. Of course, this is how people defined themselves, not only today, but in antiquity. And so, of course, in ancient Athens, when they developed a notion of themselves, they would say, we are rational, the Persians are irrational. We can decide our own laws, the Persians can't decide anything. We are free, they are slaves to their king. And so they set up this set of binary oppositions, right? That we are these good things and they are the bad things. And of course the Jews do the same thing because they are set aside as the holy people of God. They are set aside to be the one place in the fallen world where God's will is completed and is perfect. And so this is why, of course, Jesus goes to the lost sheep of house of Israel, and there's this separation between the pagans who live in the Holy Land and the Jews. That is destroyed in the ministry of Jesus, right? He, of course, ends his, before he ascends to his Father, he ends his ministry on earth by saying to his disciples, go and do what? Preach to all nations. So God had for a while, for a time, set apart one people for him, the people of Israel, so that he could have one place on earth, and then when the Christ comes, the mission goes to the whole world. And that's why all nations are in. What happens at Pentecost? The people in Jerusalem hear these people speaking in every tongue of all nations. But this doesn't mean that the sense of exclusivity is lost. The church is now the kingdom of God on earth. The church is the place on earth where God's will is done. But that doesn't mean we don't still have a sense in which we are somehow holy on earth and supposed to be holy on earth. It's no longer based on blood. It's no longer based on keeping away from people who don't eat the way we do, who don't eat kosher. It's no longer based on people who don't have our genetics or our ritual purity. And yet there is a sense in which we still have to be different in the world. There is still an exclusivity, and we heard that in St. Paul's epistle reading. He said that you are the temple of God, right? The temple, of course, is a place that is set apart. It is holy. It is different from the rest of the world. It's where God's will is done. And that's what the church is supposed to be. So while there is a breaking down of the wall between Jew and Gentile, and now all nations are welcome to be part of the people of God, something is still required of us to be the people of God. This was easier for previous generations of immigrant churches, right? The immigrant churches already saw themselves as walled off from society. And so America is a wonderful place, right? I love America. But there are some problems in American culture, and there always have been things that distinguished immigrants from that American culture. And when we separated ourselves in an ethnic group, that had some bad sides and it had some good sides. And the good side was we saw ourselves as different from the broader culture. We saw ourselves as needing to live a different way. As those ethnic boundaries break down, we need to still see ourselves as different, only now it has to be that we live the Christian virtues. We don't just sort of slouch into the world, because the world around us is like a rushing river. And if we step into it without being careful, without having a sense of a boundary, we will be washed away from the holy life of God. So let's live as people who understand who are not just sort of slouching through our lives like robots or zombies, but who are thinking about the decisions we make. What sort of entertainment do we employ in our lives, right? We don't have to be prudes, we don't have to be Puritans, but what sort of entertainment are we watching, right? How are we spending our time? With whom are we spending our time? How are we living? Great Lent is just over the horizon. Let's think about these things so that during the period of Great Lent, it is a period for us to remind ourselves of the pure lives that we are supposed to lead. And in that way, we become the temple of God on earth.